What's up, world, and welcome to the All Real Show. This is where we discuss issues pertaining to the socioeconomic system and how they relate to everything. Why and how are the fundamental questions. Answer them enough, you get to the truth. I'm your host, Alex. So welcome back, everyone, to part 2 of my discussion with Perry Gruber, the founder of Copiosis, which is a brand new socioeconomic system that incorporates a algorithm that quantifies essentially all human production and interaction and how it relates to society and the environment. It's really, really intriguing, really groundbreaking and forward thinking. The first episode we covered a lot, but how the algorithm works, the questions that pertains to, or I should say what input goes into it. But I wanted to start this episode talking about that and how information is actually input into the algorithm. So we talked, or I should say you've mentioned a lot about, well, this action will get net benefit rewards. And, like the end of last episode, you were even saying, just being born, and I agree, gives huge net benefit to the parents and to, probably the biggest, right? In anyone's life. So, but I'm really curious about this one is how is that actually put in to the algorithm?
Yeah. So that's the detail we don't know at this point. I can give some detail, but the actual detail we're not going to know because we don't have the technology yet. We're getting close, but we don't have it.
I got you.
So at some point, if you look right now, we have a sense of let's just look at a child being born. We have the sense of like an intuitive sense of the value that's created when a child comes into it. We know that many, 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 many parents want children. We know that in some cultures, having children produces great economic potential. Mm-hmm. We also know that there's a lot of pride that comes from a child coming into the world. There was a time not long ago when the United States government attempted to put a monetary value on a human life as a way to compensate people when their child died. And I can't remember what that amount of money was, but it's irrelevant. The point is that we've tried to calculate that in the past. But as with any measure of net benefit value, the decision point occurs within the culture, the specific culture, assisted by experts. So who would be the experts that we're answering your question, how do we actually get the data into the algorithm, right?
Right.
How do we, okay. So who are the experts that would measure this? Well, there are experts in insurance that have actuarial tables that probably have some input to this, that can inform this. There are philosophers that have some knowledge that can influence this decision. There are psychologists and psychiatrists that can have some influence into this. There are family counselors. There are doctors. There are academicians. There are all kinds of people, and they're researchers. And there are researchers, and all of these people would be passionate about providing expert testimony about what this number should be, the input value should be. So let's just go through the algorithm and take a look. So the first one is how many how many people are producing babies. We have an idea of how many people are producing babies. How many, what are the resources that go into producing a baby? There are a lot of resources.
That's personal.
There are a lot of resources that go into that. And it's interesting because when we talk about the algorithm, it gets kind of, one of the things that Jarek, our CTO, was talking about was wanting to avoid kind of the Ponzi scheme nature of thinking about this, because when you think about just this one, the inputs that go into producing a baby, you go in this circle because it's the career that the parents have that goes into producing that baby. It's the education that goes into creating that baby that the parents have. It's the sex and it's the sperm and it's the ovum and all that stuff, but it's the intellect that goes into creating the baby. It's the electricity that's keeping the house warm that they're doing it in that goes into creating that baby. You see, it's a large morass of data that goes into this algorithm. And this is where at some point it has to come down initially to subjective human decisions, erring on the side of being generous. That's the key. Whereas in today's world, we err on the side of being stingy because the money that we pay people is coming from other people's pockets. But in Copiosis, MBR is coming out of nowhere. So it doesn't matter how much we give. We can be generous. And so our subjective decision relative to this one productive act of producing a baby can be generous. Right?
Yeah, I follow you.
Yeah. So hang on a second. So it doesn't have to be, the answer doesn't have to be black and white. It doesn't have to be able to be objectively defined or scientifically rigorously decided. It doesn't have to have any of those criteria that like RBEers or mathematicians want to bring to the table. It just has to satisfy the parents and the baby.
Right.
They're the only people that matter.
Yeah. Again, man, I totally follow you. That was a great way of laying it out and explaining it. You made a couple good points. I just want to mention again about the black and white. I'm a victim of that too. I'm guilty of that too. And I try not to be, and I know a lot of people are, like you mentioned, especially in the term you use, which I like, our ecosystem of these types of thinkers and stuff. And that's also why I wanted to kind of clarify earlier, some of these questions I ask they might be like, well, give me a black or white sort of response, but it's mainly just a curious, and I know things don't have to be black and white, especially starting out. A lot of these things will take their own shape and also, like with what you just said pertaining to that, I think is it's also very important. It's like I mentioned in the last episode that this system is basically already in place. Mm-hmm. I mean, we are so close to a transition. We are on the verge. And
yes, we are.
And it's because of a lot of reasons. Again, nothing is really hardly black and white when you break it down and analyze it. But because like the example you were just using about how would these subjective things be quantified or whatever, even in this system that we're living in now, everything is accountable in some way. So like you used even insurance companies. I like that because we also mentioned that in last episode, but there is, yes, you may not need insurance companies in a Copiosis type society, but those people understand, value, what it takes to fix, where if you come to marry you, I don't know. I've always taken my car to the shop and walked away, So mechanics can tell you what's involved. Insurance people can tell you what's involved. Psychological researchers can tell you what's involved, and, they've done. And so all the foundational structures are already there. It's basically just that to try to sum it up, they're being utilized a lot of times in not let's just say not the most efficient way in this system. Negative a lot, but at minimum, not just the most efficient. But you would just take those same things that are already in place and just tweak them to where instead of now, for example, the insurance people are saying, okay, we're going to pay you $3,000 because that's what the damage is worth. They would be taking that knowledge and applying it to essentially a net benefit reward system.
Yes. So they would take their knowledge and assess the component of the information stream that they have expertise in, and provide expert testimony to the citizenry so that the citizenry can then decide at what point in the index range a variable should be for a given act.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And actuaries and researchers, they're going to try and get really, they could wrap themselves around the axle trying to be really prescriptive and specific and accurate, but you don't have to be. All you have to do, and this is the beauty of this thing, all you have to do is produce a reward sufficient enough for the receiver of the award to be happy, to be able to say, yes, this reward is commensurate with what I perceive to be the value I created for society. But what's on the rewardees, the recipient of the reward's shoulders, is he or she has to understand how MBR and the system works. So, for example, in today's world, if a builder of a house sells a house, let's say he gets $3,000 for that house, because, it's the net of the cost, right? Or maybe it's $20,000 for the house. In Copiosis, they're not going to get that much MBR at first. But the MBR, so long as the house keeps being lived in, the MBR just keeps coming and coming and coming. So there's a stream of MBR. And if a person builds 10 houses, then that stream is multiplied by 10, so long as 10 families or whatever are living in those 10 houses. And the same thing goes with any other thing. And it's interesting because we already have examples of this. In the music industry, when a person creates a song and
the royalty.
As long as that song plays, that musician is getting revenue for that song. It's the same thing. Why should song makers and movie makers and other IP creators be the only ones to get that kind of reward, that passive reward? Everybody should be getting it.
Exactly. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I've thought that exact same example. I mean, I'm a musician. I've done stuff like that. And I always thought, man, really all I have to do is make a one-hit wonder. That's all it takes.
Exactly. That's right.
I'm paid for life. I can suck the rest of the time. But,
that's right.
So, and I get what you're saying about that, because it would cost the house essentially, or anything produced, essentially keeps generating benefit to somebody.
Value.
A value, right.
Yeah.
And I guess because I did want to ask, it's sort of along the same lines of, I guess, the input. But so have you not maybe gotten to that stage yet about how would that be put in individually? Like, say you build a house, I move in. That's just something that would, I guess, be factored into a certain time frame of, I would essentially reassess my benefit overall of the house. That's just an ongoing thing, right?
Yeah. So early on, we talked about what the period of reward would be. So like today, you get a paycheck either monthly or biweekly or once a week or whatever. In Copiosis, we haven't decided what the period, the quote unquote pay period, is going to be.
I got you.
But with regard to making something, once you make the thing, so long as you and even if you make it differently each time, the Copiosis organization has an idea of the answer for all the variable questions. The only one it doesn't really have an idea of, and even this one would be realized over time, is the subjective value. I mean, if you build a house, presumably you're going to build the house the same way most of the time with a little bit of tweaks. So we know, the Copiosis organization would know what resources you're using with the decisions you made there. It would know at any given time how many people are making houses. It would know at any given time how many people are wanting houses. And then all the rest of the variables it would know too, especially the other variables, because those are pretty concrete, as you said. So in the period, whatever that period is going to be, the pay period, so to speak, some of those variables are going to fluctuate. And so your MBR passive, let's call it passive MBR income, that's going to fluctuate over time. But it's not going to be huge fluctuations like a 2000 or 2008 downturn type fluctuation.
Right.
But they're going to fluctuate from time to time because, if you build 10 houses at one period, maybe 2 of those houses are vacant. And then at another period, maybe 1 burns down, or another period, they're all occupied, So some of the variables are going to be known, and then other variables are going to change over time. And so your MBR curve, so to speak, would fluctuate across the periods.
Well, that's what's so interesting to me about this whole concept, because you've termed it a bridging technology, and I can't think of a better term for it. That's what's so interesting and intriguing to me, is sort of like we've been talking about here a little back and forth now, is that so much is in place already. And it's interesting when you think more and more in depth about Copiosis, how so many answers, when you, again, give it enough thought, you realize, oh, well, wait a minute, that actually is already answered, you know,
yes.
or we already have. You don't realize it at first because it's a different way of thinking. It's a different, you know, almost like I was saying about, you know, if I'm dying, I want to give my NBR to somebody. That's initially what I was thinking, because I'm thinking in this context.
Yes.
And when you start thinking, like a lot of us try to, in that futuristic sort of concept, it is a different way of thinking. So, but that's what's so interesting to me about this whole thing, is that, like I said, the more you think about something, so many answers are already there because we've already quantified them, and, you know, they're just being, again, used or applied or thought about differently. And then,
go ahead.
Yeah. So I was just saying that the part is quantified, and then the part that isn't, that's what's fun about this, you know, because it lets you figure how to manifest that. And
you get excited when you come to the figuring. Yeah. And what I was going to say is, and the mental part is already here too, Alex. I mean, sometimes, like I was talking with this woman who's worked at Apple her entire life, and she's probably 63 or so. I mean, she was around when Steve Jobs was just getting the thing started. And
interesting.
She's really, really smart, and she's still having a really hard time getting into this mindset where she can see how elegant this idea is. And we were talking over Skype, so you could see how her brain was on her face, how her brain was trying to make sense of it as her current beliefs were being confronted with what you're calling a future way of thinking.
Right.
I call a way of being. And the thing is, this way of being, Alex, already exists too. It's just that it's been obscured by this capitalist way, or this current system way of thinking. Because back in the day, and I'm not trying to venerate the Native American cultures, but I'm using them as an example. Sure. The Native American culture thought of humanity in this way already. There was collaboration, and there was value in the individual, and the value existed to support and uplift the community. And so the way that Copiosis approaches society is not a future way. It's not a new way. It is the way. It is the way that's underneath the way we've been trained, which is a delusion, to behave with each other. All we're doing is we're taking off the current system, and we're saying, be a human being, and we will reward you for that.
Yeah, man. That's awesome. And that was a great way to say it, and a great way to put it back into focus. And I think a lot of people, anybody listening, should understand that. I know people in our ecosystem they think that a lot. And, you know, I've heard so many people say, even I have a sister who used to say that a lot, you know, we should just go back to hunting and gathering because, you know, that's the way that's because what they're actually saying or meaning is what you just said.
Yes,
you know?
They're not actually thinking going back to living in teepees or caves.
Right.
And this is the thing. We can't go back. We can't. We have to move forward.
And why would you?
Well, that's right, Alex. Why would you? When we have a technology now that can do so much for us and create a world that enables us to live in ways that are just mind-boggling to contemplate.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, technology, it's like I said, technology is great. I mean, most people think of technology in a computer sense, which maybe by definition, it's even more that. But yeah, technology is, like I say, that's back when, the cavemen found some sharp rock to cut something instead of chewing it apart.
Exactly.
And they're like, hey, this works a lot better. Right. Why am I going to chew this shit apart anymore? It doesn't make any sense. So, and that's all it is. It's evolution. It's, I mean, like I said, we use the term technology, and that's more appropriate now for all the computer stuff. But yeah, and so I've always felt that. So that's why I think it was great that you just said what you said, because I think most people can relate to that. We came from there. It's inherent in us as humans to do that.
Yeah.
And so many people I've seen express that, but they express it, in this way, that way, and perhaps they don't correlate the two. But anyway, with what you just said about Copiosis doing that, I totally agree, man. I think that's basically what it does.
Yeah, it is.
It goes back to that natural affirmation and reward and gratitude and stuff like that.
Yes. And the only people who have a problem with that are the people who are so wrapped up in the current way of thinking that they've lost sight of their own humanity. So I'm interacting with a guy on the Facebook page who his first reaction was, "This is nonsense, get a job." And that's just expressing his own indoctrination. And,
exactly.
and through the conversation, it turns out he said, "I've worked since I was 14 years old and I've had to work, and it's just what you have to do."
Right.
There's now he's sharing the pain of his indoctrination.
Right, right.
In Copiosis, you don't have to work. First of all, you don't have to do shitty jobs when you're 14.
Right.
Secondly, you don't even have to work if you don't want to when you're 14.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and for some people, Copiosis is confrontational because it reveals to them that everything that they've been doing since they were 14, they didn't have to do. And that sucks to realize that.
Oh, yeah.
So I get why people are angry when they interact with Copiosis.
Well, I'm sure it's anger. I think it's even more of what you just said. It is the total indoctrination, and when you are born, it's like a lot of people have said, but Jacques Fresco has said specifically, if you're born with the headhunters in Amazon, you're going to be a headhunter. Yes. If you're born in rural southern United States, you're going to be a redneck. Or at least the chances are very, very high.
Very
and
high.
That's not a coincidence. It's
right.
because we are products of our environment, and obviously everybody alive today has grown up in, regardless of the area of the world, essentially in this kind of system that says this is good, this is bad, this is what we reward, this is and so it's kind of like the saying, it's easier to fool someone than to convince them they've been fooled. And so I get that, of breaking out of molded ideas and beliefs. But I also just wanted to mention, because it's going back a little bit, but I think it's important. I just wanted to tell you, and of course anybody listening, but when we were talking about, you were mentioning how so many of these things are already in place as far as figuring out the net benefit. You already have researchers and scientists and all these people that do all these things already. Something else that is in this ecosystem that I honestly don't know who formulated it or created it, but it's basically the same thing along the same lines. And they talk about, instead of basically being a president, a one-person president, you have what they've coined a resource management team. And it's basically the same thing. And that's kind of like we were also saying earlier, that people want black and white. This is right. This is wrong. I agree with that. I don't. But the end goal here is the same. And what are we trying to get to? So I just wanted to point that out, that I thought that was interesting, because it's basically the same thing. They're just saying, instead of having one president, you have people who are best in their fields coming up with the best consensus. And then people, again, trying to say this real quickly, but then people as a whole kind of decide what happens. Yes.
And if you look at just the United States as an example, because some people could fear that, well, if everyone decides, then my way is not, I'm not going to get my way. But most, not to make this a political conversation, but most people in the United States tend towards liberal ideas or progressive ideas, not far left, but skew in that direction, which is why President Trump recently said, if vote by mail was the law of the land, a Republican would never get elected president. It's just the population leans in the direction of the future, forward movement. And so when you talk about these statisticians and researchers and scientists and data miners and just interested people in numbers and mathematicians coming up with these expert testimony opinions on subjects that would need to go into the algorithm and therefore be measured. And then society has the final word. Society is wise and it's future oriented. And so the decisions that society will generally make, if it is not under an oppressive system, will lean towards the future. And it will also lean generous.
So that's interesting. I hadn't actually thought of that, but now that you're mentioning that, again, this may be slightly out of the bounds of Copiosis itself. I'm not sure, but how, or at least pertaining to Copiosis or in general, how do you feel about that? Whatever is in a new system, would there be or any form of, I guess, governance or governing bodies, or how would
you mean like legislatures and congressmen and things like that?
Well, yeah, and maybe not even to that extent, or perhaps to that extent. I'm not sure how you feel about that, but yeah, either that or how would any basically decisions be made as far as what gets done where? As far as projects, public works projects.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. So in that regard, so today we have organizations that create standards, right? We have internet standards organizations. We have the ICEEE, which is an engineering organization. Right. We have the Architect Council, or whatever they're called, the Institute of Tech. I don't know what they're called, but the people who do building codes and things like that. Those organizations are made up of people in those fields. Right. And they decide based on their experience and their education and all that, right? And so when a road is designed, let's say a road is going around a curve, there's a certain bank that road is designed at, so that cars, when they take that curve at a certain speed, and they're also designed for a certain speed. So when those cars take a certain speed around that corner, the centrifugal force doesn't cause the car to fly off the curve, the road. Right. And this standard, or this criteria that the road is built to, has been arrived at by the Department of Transportation and transportation engineers and asphalt designers, people who make asphalt and the material that goes into that, and rubber, and the OSTA, the Transportation and Safety Administration. These are all people who have expertise in these areas. Now, in Copiosis, once the transition happens, it's the same with insurance, Alex. I mean, those insurance people, these people that create these standards are still going to be around. And people who, let's say a bridge is being built, the person building the bridge is going to want NBR for building the bridge. So his NBR is determined by the amount of net benefit his bridge creates. So if he builds a bridge and tomorrow it falls down, he's not going to get any NBR, and neither is anyone who contributed to the building of that bridge, including the suppliers of the equipment that built the bridge. So it makes sense then that the builder of that bridge is going to go to the standards people, the organizations like the Transportation Safety Organization or the engineers, and make sure that the bridge he's designing is going to last and is going to provide the benefit that he expects to be rewarded for. So you don't need a government to create those standards. The government per se isn't creating the standards. It's the people in the government that create the standards, and those people aren't going to disappear when we transition to Copiosis. They'll still be here. And for the most part, the people who are passionate about that kind of stuff are going to stick around and continue to do that stuff.
Exactly.
So one of the concerns that people have when the detractors of Copiosis have about Copiosis is that, well, if you do this, then everyone's going to stop working. And there is going to be a period where a significant number of people are going to take time off to decompress from the current system.
Exactly.
They're going to breathe. They're going to breathe a heavy sigh and want to sit around a bit, and that's okay. But there are still going to be people who will get bored with that. There will be other people who will not even need that because they love doing what they do. And those people will continue to do the things, and there'll be enough of those people, I'm sure of it. There'll be enough of those people to keep things going. I mean, look at COVID. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to point out that that doesn't hold water for me when people say that, because I don't know if they haven't thought it through, if they're just spitballing, I don't know. But with what you were just saying, because I've used this example before when people say stuff like that. Oh, if people didn't have money as an incentive or something to make you do it, you're not going to. That's absolute bullshit, because how many things in this current system do people do that they get nothing for? And here I am sitting a prime example of that.
Exactly. Doing this show, right?
Right. And I've said it. How many people on YouTube make podcast or whatever? And that's just, one little small segment. All these people who literally volunteer, meaning they're not getting any money in this current system. Yeah. And they're still doing all these things. In fact, if you research into different aspects of a lot of things, and you'll find out a lot of the stuff is done by volunteer and or people donating money, which means they're not getting anything out of that. It's not an investment, and they're donating something that they've took their time to get, aka money. So it's just, that's to me is just an initial reactionary response because it doesn't make sense. And again, you can see it doesn't make sense to say or think that, because already in this system, like I said, you have countless number of people who are doing things that they're not getting anything for or any, money per se for. Yeah.
Yeah. And some of those people are making the biggest contributions to the world.
Exactly.
Yeah. And some of those people who are making the biggest contributions in the end up being very wealthy, but they didn't start out with that intent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, again, a lot through history. I'm sure you and a lot of people are aware of this, but some of the biggest inventors, creators, idea people haven't made a lot of money from it. That's right. Einstein wasn't a billionaire. Tesla, in fact, he died broke almost, and it's true of a lot of, even now, even today, look up Google research or scientist salary, even the different classes of scientists. And these people go to school, they study all this stuff just like a doctor. They get paid anywhere from 60 to maybe 110,000 a year, somewhere in that ballpark. And, but they're the ones that are creating the technology we're using and the life-saving things. And, so in a Copiosis world system, they would be rich like they should be. They should be rich, not somebody sitting around saying, hey, you know what? All my workers are making me this money. I'll give you some and you owe me a bunch more back.
Right.
So, yeah. I'm real quick. I want to just, because I also wrote this down, about how information was put into the algorithm. I understand it's it's a work in progress. And again, there's so many variables there that will pan out and play themselves out. But for anybody who's wondering, because that was a really, I don't know how to say it, nagging sort of question or wonder I had. So basically, this is what has said on about how the information would be put into the algorithm. So in Copiosis, anyone who's interested can volunteer to help run the Copiosis economy. It's based on Stigmergy. Copiosis organization comprises millions of people around the world volunteering to make Copiosis economic system work. And all the volunteers do is collect data, feed it into the algorithm, and ensure people are rewarded fairly. You did say, of course, a lot of other administration happens too, but the organization makes no laws, tells no one what to do. And meanwhile, people passionate about oversight, watchdogging, and whistleblowing get rewarded in BR, making sure Copiosis organization members perform their function with honesty and integrity. So, that's the whole thing really to me, Perry. It's just, it's so cool, man. It's so interesting. And I've given a lot of thought, into how a realistic transition can happen, because there's so many factors to take into account. And from what I understand of Copiosis so far, I think it very much covers pretty much all or mostly all up to this point of the bases that are involved.
Yeah, and not many people know about our political strategy. Not many people are under our philosophical approach, which answers a lot of the questions that most people can't figure out. And so, we talk a lot about this in our social group on Facebook. There is a deep spiritual underpinning that informs a lot of the decisions that have been made in Copiosis and also inform the process by which the transition is happening. And so we have, and I wrote about this very early on, we have an advantage over others in our ecosystem because we understand how ideas become reality. Mm-hmm. And so our transition borrows heavily from that understanding. And we are seeing with increasing speed our understanding bearing out. More people are coming to appreciate it. More people are coming to offer their assistance. Higher level quality of people are beginning to look at it. People from both sides of the aisle are conservatives and progressives both are starting to look at it and appreciate it and join our work. There's just so much evidence proving out our transition strategy that, it's just bearing itself out. It's like a self-fulfilling statement. We stated it back in 2014, and now it's just the statement is fulfilling itself.
Right. Yeah. Again, I think what you just said is important. Basically to say it easily or whatever, it's almost 50-50, physical and mental.
Yeah.
And it's obviously knowing that it's vital. It's vital. It's like I said, you can have the absolute flawless best idea, but it's gonna die floundering if you don't have, if it doesn't gain traction and momentum. And just to understand, and I know with your background in spirituality, that's very important in this aspect, because to connect with people, again, there's so many layers, but to connect with people spiritually, to connect with them in this case financially, in the way they're thinking, all the levels and layers, it's so vital to try to attack, for lack of a better word, each one. And I think you've done a great job with that, with Copiosis and trying to think it through. And you did mention, so back in 2014 was when this kind of started taking shape.
Well, I wrote a blog that laid out our strategy, and I gave examples that were happening then about how the strategy was working. And I talked about what I called back then, I don't call it that, our competitive, which was our understanding of what you call the mental side.
I got you.
and it's bearing itself out. For me personally, the biggest evidence is my longevity in feeling the way I felt. I haven't gotten tired of it. I haven't given up. I'm far from anywhere near that. And the more I see it bearing fruit, the more committed I become to it. And I know that's an exponentially expanding curve. Mm-hmm. So think about that. Exponential expansion. So that means that as we spread ourselves, the rate of spread increases exponentially the more we spread.
Right. It's like a snowball down a hill.
Yes. So there is an inevitability in that. And so in that inevitability, we can relax. Now, not everybody on the team is relaxing. Some, like we just lost I won't say we lost. We had a person who I felt was key to our movement forward, who decided to kind of spend his time elsewhere mm-hmm. for the time being. But I think he'll come back, like many people do. Mm-hmm. The thing is that we, just like the Copiosis organization, we get all kinds of people with all kinds of mindsets coming in the organization to participate. Few of them understand deeply the mental side of this, and so they lose patience, get frustrated when we say everything is unfolding perfectly, and then we have evidence that proves that. But they don't stick around to see the evidence, or they see the evidence and they call it coincidence, and so they don't come into the knowing. And so it's interesting to watch. And this experience with these people gives me the understanding that I bring to interacting with people who are not on the organization, like that guy I was talking about on the Facebook page. I can see where he's coming from and understand where he's coming from, likely better than he can understand.
Exactly, Perry. Yeah, that's something else I say, man, is thought processes follow same patterns. So you can change the situation or the example or whatever of what's happened that's making somebody think something, but people's thought patterns and processes are a lot of the same. Yeah. So, right, you can relate that to different people or different things that they might say because you know how they're thinking or approaching it or viewing it. And, I get that part too, man, what you just said. Something about all humans, even if you can rise above or whatever, weather the storm kind of thing, is we all live in the here and now. Mm-hmm. So it's easy to say, obviously, and perhaps to think, well, in 10 years or 20 years, but then people's like, okay, well, now I have to go to work 5-6 days
exactly.
a week. And now I have to do right. So I get it, man. And I'm in it too, and thinking like that. But kind of like I mentioned earlier that, core personalities and how people react to things and the way I am. And I believe a lot of people or a lot of us, whatever, are in this way. You have to really believe, and I believe it to be true, that what we're doing, everybody's doing in this sense, is truly making a difference, but it's playing a part in the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And kind of like, again, the saying of, planting a tree that you'll never enjoy its shade. But that tree is going to benefit everybody else in the future. So you basically have to have that kind of mentality and approach, to know that we're making a difference and playing a part in the change, because everything is just slowly evolving, that's how things work. So, so I wanted to ask you about, you did power marketing with the government. I wasn't sure what that was, so I looked it up, and it said, well, it sounds, just the term sounded generic to me. I'm like, I don't know what that is. I mean, what is that, flyers or something? I'm power marketing this, but no.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I put 1,000 flyers up today. I didn't know what was happening. But no, it turns out Power Marketing Administration is a U.S. federal agency within the Department of Energy with the responsibility solely, which was interesting to me, or at least from what I understood, solely of marketing hydropower. And so I wanted to ask you about that because, again, it's right in line with what we're talking about, and everybody's saying renewable energy and you know, all these things. And what did you, I guess if you could just tell me, what did you learn about that in general, hydropower and its efficiency maybe, or anything you can tell me about it?
Yeah, I learned a lot. And given the lens that I view the world, it's going to come out kind of different, I think, maybe than what you're expecting. So
sure,
the hydroelectric system. So the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers owns and maintains 30 dams in the Northwest, and they're spread up and down the Columbia. The Bonneville Power Administration, which is the agency I worked in, is responsible for aggregating the electrical output of those, and then selling the power up and down the West Coast across its own high voltage transmission system. So the Corps of Engineers owns the hydroelectric plants, and the Bonneville Power Administration owns the transmission lines over which the electricity from those plants move.
Gotcha.
And then Bonneville sells that electricity to public utilities and private utilities all up and down the West Coast. What I learned is really how these dams have played an integral role into building the culture of the Northwest. Mm-hmm. So the Columbia River was once a sacred, still is, a sacred place for the Native American tribes that lived and still live in this area. Mm-hmm. And there were portions of this river that were and are fished by those tribes. There were runs of salmon that were so plentiful, so populous that you could walk. So the river's like almost, I think in some places, a mile wide, and you could literally walk across the backs of these salmon.
I thought that's what you were going to say.
Yeah, there were that many of them in the old days. But of course, when European Americans settled in the West, they canned the shit out of those fish.
Right.
And then they built
it to
dams.
the white man.
Yeah. And then they built dams that blocked the fish's pathways back to their spawning grounds. So they're anadromous. They come from they're born in the rivers. They go out to the ocean. They spend a few years out there. Then they come back up the rivers to spawn. Mm-hmm. And so the treaties between the United States and these tribes had also included like water rights and fishing rights and other things. And so there's this interplay, there's this intimate interplay between the creation of electricity, how that electricity is distributed, and its effect, the marketing effect of that power on the cultures that exist in the Northwest. Mm-hmm. They're intimately connected, and it goes right back to Copiosis in the sense that everything is tied together. You can't do one thing on this planet and not have an effect on other things on this planet. Mm-hmm. And so over the course of its development, the Bonneville Power Administration not only was established as a power marketing agency, it also is a major fish and wildlife player in this area, and a major player in the renewable space also. So while hydropower is viewed as renewable because it generates electricity from the flow of water from the rivers, mm-hmm. There are other forms of renewable power that Bonneville is involving itself in, including wind power, geothermal power, nuclear power. There's one nuclear plant. And so the Bonneville is really seen, not many people are aware of it, but it really is like the backbone of the Northwest way of life.
It sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah, it's so integral to everything that happens here. And the low electric rates are predominantly responsible or the result of this hydroelectric system, this jewel that the Northwest has. So yeah, it is really a phenomenal organization of some really dedicated folks. And I'll tell you, we were talking either in this part or in the previous, we were talking about how some people think that people would stop working if we immediately transition to Copiosis. I would say that hardly any of the people that currently work at the Bonneville Power Administration would stop working if we transition to Copiosis, because those people freaking love what they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've actually gotten that from at least that segment of the population of people who do that, like electrical work. Because my experience, almost all electric I've ever had has been co-ops.
Yeah.
I lived in Northern Virginia. There's a co-op there. I live actually in the western part of Virginia now, and I have a co-op here that services the electric. And as a matter of fact, it's kind of ironic because I finally opened my mail that accumulated a big enough pile recently, and not only did I find a check in there that I didn't know I had for my escrow, but that was nice. But I also had a little smaller thing from the electric saying we're giving you this credit back on your bill because we've satisfied all our other stuff, Yep,
that's how they work.
Yeah, that's how they work, and I get that impression from a lot of those people. I think because again, not going off on this path, but like I know you understand, but it's because of the reward they're naturally getting, right?
Yes,
they're naturally getting. That's the key word. And the realization of what they're doing and what it's providing, and and just a real quick sidestep to the other side of that obviously, whether people realize it or not, is why so many people these days feel depressed and all these things, because they know they're just a cog in a machine that is really producing nothing of value or helping people or, not even to add in the factors of how you get treated and dogged out, because they're like, what are they going to do? You're going to do quit and starve,
Exactly.
But it's a lack of natural gratitude and reward and stuff like that. So I absolutely could see that people in those positions truly enjoy what they do
for every reason that you just said.
Yeah, and
even like the administrative assistants that I worked with had that dedication. There were very few people, Alex, at the Bonneville Power Administration who were there because it was just a job.
Right. And it's got to be, that's something else I've said. I've worked a decent amount of different jobs and different types, and who you work with makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, it really does. I've even done the same profession in different establishments. And sometimes I'll go into one establishment and, the whole vibe is like people's pissed off. Yeah. They're irritated, and you feel it the whole time. And then I go into other establishments doing the exact same thing. And when that building, whatever the vibe is different, it totally feels different. It's amazing how much difference that makes. So, congrats to them, man. Just a shout out to them. That's awesome. I mean, not only what they're doing, but the fact that it sounds like they're all renewables they're going for, and they understand that realization. That's awesome. And also, I wanted to ask you about your experience with the ayahuasca plant medicines. What it is, real quickly, for anyone who doesn't know, it's a brew made from leaves of one plant and stalks from a different plant.
Very good.
The leaves of the one plant contain DMT, which is a naturally occurring substance in plants and animals and humans, but I guess taken in larger doses, it produces a hallucinogenic effect. And the stalks of the other plant contain MAO inhibitors, which essentially allow the DMT to take effect, because DMT by itself in your body just burns up or whatever it does real quick. So anyway, and I've done drugs and I've done hallucinogens, but I've never done DMT like that itself. And I've heard rave things about it, and just from doing other hallucinogens, I do know the consciousness that it shifts you to, unlocks, whatever the word is there. But I wanted to ask you about that. What's your experience with that? Like, how did you even learn or get involved, and where did you do it? And I don't know, really interesting.
Yeah. First of all, that was I've never heard such an excellent characterization of what it is. That was, you've obviously done your research.
I have. Thank you.
Yeah, that was really well done. So yeah, I don't remember when I first heard of it. But I set an intention at some point to want to have an experience. Mm-hmm. And it's illegal in the United States. It's a felony to have it. Mm-hmm. And, but, you know, like a lot of what I do it because I want to do it.
Yeah, which and anybody should.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
And so one thing led to another, and I met over the internet a shaman in Peru which is where it is predominantly used as a cultural tool, mm-hmm. who offers an initiation rite and then will mail people ayahuasca brewed and ready to go for quite a bit of money.
Really?
There are a lot of people. Yeah,
well,
there are a lot
talk
of people.
After the show. Go ahead.
Okay. There are a lot of people from South America who are not just doing what he's doing, but also travel the world, offering ayahuasca rituals to people, to mainstream cultures, because they believe it is the answer to the insanity they see expressed in mainstream cultures. Mm-hmm. And so many people are having the opportunity to partake of this wonderful spiritual experience. But anyway, I received a few months of the brew from him, and then was inspired to figure out how to brew it myself because it was expensive as hell. And I learned how, and then got the ingredients myself and began brewing my own. And over the course of a year and a half, I had almost 100 ceremonies.
Wow.
On my own, and experienced really extraordinary consciousness. Mm. Yeah, just like so many insights and awarenesses that still inform how I move through the world today. And so that was just the beginning. Ayahuasca was my spiritual path has been going since I was like 6, but mm-hmm. I would say ayahuasca was one of the peaks of a sound wave expressing what my spiritual path looked like. And then after doing those ceremonies on my own, I led ceremonies for a short time with groups of people.
Very cool.
Yeah, it is really, in my opinion, it's really important to have a grounding in a consciousness raising experience in order to do this kind of work, because it allows one to be calm and at ease with the progress, which would ordinarily cause someone to get frustrated and impatient.
Right. Yeah, it's again throughout my life, different times, just talking about drugs or whatever term. It's hard to explain. Sometimes people's like, well, how does pot make you feel? Yeah, you're like,
it is.
How do I explain this? And so hallucinogens are, obviously you can say certain things that are clearly identifiable, like, oh, well, if you, move your hand, you'll see like trails and color. Well, that's pretty easy to understand, but the mental side of it, it's really hard to put into words, I think.
It's not hard for me. So my experience was, aside from the visual stimuli, mm-hmm. the experience is an experience of turning your gaze from the outward looking into physical reality inward to the inward reality, and being aware, becoming consciously aware of the place from which we all come, and knowing it's that. And then you become present to the guide that chooses to accompany you on your journey through that environment. And the experience is an experience of awe, of wonder, of majesty, of profound love of self and others. And you come away with an extreme amount of comfort and well-being and self-love. Yeah, there are experiences. So in all of my experiences alone, there was an experience I had just before turning inward where entities took over my hands and became my hands, and then they would perform these diagnostics of my body, observing through my hands, my fingers, the states of my different parts of my bodies, and then they would run my body through a range of motion diagnostic, kind of like how one would test a car's parameters, like its ability to accelerate, its ability to stop, its ability to carry a load, these kinds of things.
I see, right.
Yeah, and so it would test my range of leg motion, my arm leg of motion, my torso leg of motion. It would examine my eyes and my lips and my speech and my internal organs, and it was doing this all through my hands. So my hands were rapidly moving up and down my body as I lay on my bed. And then usually that happened in the early stages, and then I would turn inward and then have these journeys inward. And those journeys usually lasted between 3 and 4 hours, which is the hallmark of an ayahuasca experience. So if you smoke DMT, just plain old DMT, the experience is about 15 minutes, maybe usually
really?
Less than that, less than that. But ayahuasca, because of the MAOI, it is a much, much longer and much, much more detailed, and as a result of that, much easier to understand coming out of it experience.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
And that was a good way, I think, to explain the hallucinogenic experience in general.
Yeah.
For me personally, it's honestly been a very long time. I mean, I did acid when I was younger, like late teens. Mm-hmm. And I did, a little bit when in my mid 20s, I did acid here and there, and I did, mushrooms, and that was really it. There was one random time, I don't know, maybe mid 30s or something, I did acid one more time. So it's been a while. But I do clearly remember a lot of the experience. And there really is nothing like it. It does.
Yeah.
It does connect your consciousness in a different way.
Yeah.
And consciousness, just that's a whole nother subject, isn't it?
Well, it's interesting because I had never done drugs, and I was never interested in them. Mm-hmm. Ayahuasca just kind of singled me out, I suppose. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because there are some people in our ecosystem who are so opposed to the non-physical aspects of life experience. And usually those people are the ones who hold so tightly to science as the answer. Mm-hmm. When there is so much broad clarity in the non-physical world that gives rise to things like science. I mean, science has its origins in consciousness. And so it seems to me, especially based on my experience with ayahuasca, that there's a higher order of understanding that science is trying to get to, but hasn't arrived at, and therefore is subordinate to consciousness.
Nicely said. Yeah, I agree with that also. The physical side is essentially just a manifestation of us, yes. What we create. Yes. And, and of course, all that comes from consciousness, right? It comes from what we understand and interpret of things. I mean, that's a good example with science is, what is any scientist going to experiment or check on or, I mean, yes, maybe something that they can't prove. So they're thinking forward or whatever in that sense, but they're still formulating what they're going to do based on kind of what we know, their consciousness.
Well said. Don't all great eureka moments in science come from intuition?
Right.
Let me try this. Oh my God, it worked.
Yes. Science is the tool. It's just like a hammer. It's just a tool that we use to try to learn and understand and grow our consciousness / understanding, I guess, of everything.
Yeah. And for me, ayahuasca was the shortcut.
Well, that's what I've That's why I was so interested when I read that about you, because everything I've heard has been that, like I said, my personal experience with other hallucinogens, and it's just awesome that we've been able, humans or whatever, have been able to find that out. And granted, again, it's probably been around thousands of years, right? I'm saying,
but still, it is fascinating that we figured that out, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I mean, these people they're surrounded by leaves and branches. How did they figure out that leaf and that branch, if you combine it, how did they figure that out, right?
That's really what blows my mind, Perry. I mean, again, if you're talking science, well, yeah, I can go pick a leaf, I can go chip a bark, I can analyze them. And then base it on what I know. Okay, this molecule won't work with that. That's one thing. But to know that, and that again just shows you the mental and the intuition and the understanding of there's only one way. So many things that were created, figured out, whatever, could have happened hundreds and thousands of years ago.
That's right.
Granted, trial and error. So maybe the guy you don't like, you say, hey, try this, and then you work on it from, we don't know how, but they still somehow came to that understanding. It is pretty amazing. It really is.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And this whole conversation has been great, Perry. It's really been interesting to get a chance to speak with you and learn about copiosis, what it is, how it works. And I really feel that it's an amazing idea and concept, and that I've seen. I know you, obviously you say it wholeheartedly, but just from my personal viewpoint, it's one of, or if not the best ideas and concepts that I've seen in a realistic transitional sense.
Yeah.
That truly incorporates as many things as you can take into account in this system and trying to switch them to a better system, basically, without just saying, okay, we're just going to start totally from scratch, because again, for what? So many things that are already in place are good. Again, they're just being utilized in the wrong way.
Yeah.
And I think Copiosis has done an excellent job of thinking that through and just, giving that thought and formulating what you guys have formulated up to this point. So I really want to congratulate you on that and everything you and your team has done up to this point. The last thing I'd like to do here is just a show segment that I do. It's just where I ask you 5 personal preference questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I like to do it. I think it's fun. It's interesting. I'm always just curious to see what people are going to say. So we'll get into that now.
Okay.
Get on with the ceremony.
And that sound means it's time for the Curious 5. Like I said, it's just 5 little personal preference questions. You can give as short or elaborate as answer as you want. So the first question is, do you have a favorite or least favorite accent?
Ooh. That's so interesting you ask that, because I think my favorite accent is the Indian accent as expressed by a female. The East Indian.
Okay, yeah.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah, interesting. There's a it's funny because you said female too. I forget her name, and I haven't researched her enough to remember her name offhand, but there's a female Indian, I'm not sure if it's East Indian, you have to forgive me on that, but philosopher person. She's very, very smart, very intuitive, knows all this stuff. And and she talks like that. So yeah, that's cool. Do Do you happen to have a least favorite or one that kind of rubs you wrong, or?
When Germans speak, I had a very close friend, a female from Germany, and when she spoke German, it just did not sound appealing.
Yeah. Yeah, Germans just kind of in general to me sound slightly angry and I don't know, slightly like they're cutting off their words. I don't know what's happening. It's interesting. I like accents in general. That's kind of why I asked the question, but
yeah.
So, okay. Second one is, do you have a favorite or least favorite food or cuisine?
No. Food is just a fuel. I find it delicious. I guess my favorite is the food I make. My favorite is the food I make. I like the satisfaction of creating something with food that I really enjoyed creating and then eating it and finding it delicious.
Are you
my
good
least
cook?
favorite? Am I a good cook? Yes.
Yeah. Are you? Yeah.
Yeah. My least favorite food is white clumpy cheese. So like feta, gorgonzola.
Oh, okay.
Blue cheese. Ugh.
You don't like mushy mold?
No.
What? Why not? I don't understand that.
I can't even get it past my nose.
It's a different thing, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Well, that's cool, man. I know cooking too. I prefer to say I'm horrible at cooking. I really am. I make the same damn breakfast every morning and I still struggle. It's like one of those. But I absolutely love to eat. I love everything about food. I mean, I love the spices, but I really, truly, I enjoy doing it with somebody. Like my best friend, she's an amazing cook. She's one of those people that honestly, the worst thing she's ever made is one of the best things I've ever eaten. And
wow. All right.
Just unbelievable. I mean, but I enjoy doing it like with her or, with somebody like helping. I like the whole process, but because I struggle with it, it's a chore by myself, but yeah. Oh, well, I'm curious now. Do you have a dish that you like prefer to make or you're really good at, or?
You
just like experimenting, right?
Yeah.
I got you. That's cool. Well, that's half the fun of it right there. So.
Yes, it is.
All right. Third one is, do you have a favorite music or genre?
No, I have a genre I dislike.
Okay.
My favorite, I have so many types of songs that I enjoy, but the songs that the genre I tend not to enjoy is country music or music from like the 30s and 50s, simply because both for me have racial undertones.
Mm-hmm.
The racial message they tend to convey for me is off-putting.
Oh, well, I feel you there, man. I mean, I'm big on music, like I said, being a musician and whatnot. But personally, I've always, it's like a 2-part combo. It's the music and the vocals or the message or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to put it in like a different example, there's some songs now, like if I had to choose one category, it'd probably be like, rap, or reggae, any of that kind of, but yeah, I mean, if there's a beat I love and I'm like, oh man, I love that. But if all they're sitting there saying is, money, give me more money.
Exactly,
I own everything.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't want to sit there and hear that. I'm not feeling it. Give me the instrumental. I'll rock that, but yeah. So I know what you mean about that. Yeah. And in country for me personally, it's a little too whiny. Aside from the racial overtones.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I get it. Your life sucks. Your girl left you. Your dog's got one leg. I don't know what to tell you, Tell them to hop it off, I don't know. No. All right. So, number 4, in the Curious 5 is, do you have, and this one's kind of grand, I guess, but do you have a favorite memory or experience in your life?
So many of those.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I know.
so too many to single out.
Yeah. No, I know. I switched that one too. That question.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I was just earlier, actually, I thought of that and I'm like, he's got a pretty vast background. Let me ask him that, but I guess that would make it even harder, actually, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. I've had so much experience. I mean, I could say that I've really enjoyed this conversation. And there have been other experiences on par with this. I mean, every ayahuasca experience has been delightful.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that. If you can't come up with anything, we'll just go with the ayahuasca. That's
yeah.
At least something we've covered that people can understand and relate to. So
there have been a couple of dreams. I know there's this one dream I had where I woke just feeling ecstasy, where I was walking in a snow-covered hill, and I came over the crest of this hill, and there was this beautiful woman walking up the hill toward me, and she was on the right, and I turned to the left, and this view unveiled itself to me, Alex, that was, I mean, just indescribable. How beautiful I felt in response to seeing that view. It was just ecstatic, this dream I had. And I woke up from the dream feeling that exact same ecstasy.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, dreams are another one that's very, very interesting to me. It goes along the lines of consciousness, right?
Yep.
Well, a last one here. We'll wrap it up. The 5 of the 5 is, do you have a natural fear, or what is your natural fear if you have one?
Oh, wow. A natural fear. How would you define that? Natural fear.
Well, to me, I mean, again, it's in this context, I guess anything that you're fear, but to me, natural fear is something like it's just naturally like heights or claustrophobia or, perhaps drowning or, something that you naturally I feel fear from that. I don't even have to think about it. Or when I do think about it, I just feel fear,
I see. Well, it used to be fear of heights, but the Marine Corps kicked that out of me. That happened in boot camp. And then I had a natural, to be honest, a fear of success, a fear of... There was a fear I had that I would get fired if I did not... The fear was expressed as, if I go work for a private corporation, I would not measure up and get fired. That was a serious fear I had. And it kept me from pursuing some opportunities until Intel recruited me. And then ironically, I ended up so dissatisfied at Intel, I quit. So they didn't have to fire me. And then recently, fears? No, after my martial arts, the culmination of my martial arts training, many of the natural fears that I would describe as natural have left me.
Mm-hmm. Well, since both of those were interesting, actually, the fear of success is very, very real.
Yeah.
And it takes different forms, of course, but in general, that's what it is. And it does hold so many people back. It's held me back a lot in my life. Yeah.
For me, the fear of success was deeply connected with my race.
I see.
Yeah. What I perceive as, what I've been indoctrinated to describe as my race.
Mm-hmm.
I should, to be more specific. I mean, there was a lot of stories I had in the past about being successful as a minority.
Right. That's great news, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because again, to track that down or trace it down, where it came from, whatever. But the point is that it's very real, and that way of thinking holds not just fear in general, but fear of that, my race, my weight, my gender, all of that is absolute nonsense. If you have a passion for something and you pursue it and you excel, people don't see that anymore. Some always will, but in general, people don't see that anymore. Those barriers that you think are there.
I totally agree with you. In fact, since we're being so real with these 5 questions,
yeah.
I'll just add another fear I had was the fear of people discovering my own queerness and trans attraction. And you're absolutely right, because the moment I owned that shit and started living it authentically, no one had a problem with it. In fact, it turned out the only person who really had a problem with it was me.
Right. Well, and the people who have a problem with it, this is what I say about anything, Perry. The people who have a problem with it, it's their problem, not yours.
Yeah.
That's what it boils down to, really.
Exactly, man. Exactly.
Really. If I want to wear pants so fucking tight, you can see whatever my hairs. I don't want to see that. But if I have a problem with it, that's my problem. If somebody else has a problem with this, that's their problem.
Yeah.
You can't let it be your problem. And that's true of anything. And I congratulate you on that and facing that fear. That's a big one. And, no matter what, again, the thing is, whether it's a queerness, whether it's, wanting to wear skin tight pants, whether it's, anything else you can come up with. If it's you can't hide from yourself. You can't run from yourself.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
And you will never, ever be content, happy, truly happy until you accept that. I totally agree. Yeah.
Totally agree. I would even go so far as to say you do the world a disservice in addition to being unhappy if you're not living authentically.
I totally agree with that. Not only on an individual level, because you're obviously going to feel negativity that you're going to put out to the world. So there's that, but there's also, how many people, and you see this all throughout history again, with all major topics that have come to light and transitioned, like, any type of transgender or queer or whatever, or women being the same as everybody else and all this stuff is, the more people that open up and talk about it and have the courage to be themselves and do that, how many other people that gives the courage and strength to do the same.
Exactly.
And so, you never can doubt that, because it's very, very real. And if you're not sure, you can look back in history, like I said, and see it play out.
Yep.
So, Perry, man, it's
you done dug into my heart with those last 5 questions. You start off easy. What's your favorite color?
Well, it's funny because the favorite memory / experience that used to be, what is your favorite color? I'm not kidding you. Yeah, you could even listen to some of the other episodes. That's what I was asking. And and I would joke, one person said, I haven't been asked that since elementary school. I said, I know, it's kind of, but then another person I asked, boy, we went into a whole tirade about, how that's interesting. And, I don't know, mine and your red may look different, but we're both taught red, so we call it red. It's just, but I did try to actually do that sort of somewhat progressive, and that's why I leave the fear as the last one.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. That's really cool though.
That was good.
Mm-hmm. Well, Perry, I again very much sincerely appreciate you taking the time to be on the show, explain everything, and even more importantly, everything that you do, the type of person you are, a good human being, with good morals and just everything you try to do for all your brothers and sisters, humanity as a whole. I absolutely applaud and I really sincerely appreciate that, just from a human to human standpoint, and I really appreciate you for everything you do with Copiosis and you taking the time to be on the show.
Thank you, Alex. I really enjoy this long form format. It really allows us to get into the depths of the issues. Mm-hmm. So I really appreciate the show that you have. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here to share with your audience. This was awesome.
I'm really glad to hear that. I am. I'm always glad to hear when somebody has liked the experience. So that's great. Again, thank you for everything, and best of luck with Copiosis. I definitely will be keeping an eye on it and seeing how the progression is taking place. It's very, very interesting to me.
Thank you, Alec.
And I want to thank you all for listening. You can find all the links to the Copiosis website, YouTube channel, Facebook page and social group, Twitter account, and Patreon page in the description. The sooner people realize the veil of lies we've bought into, and that we already possess all the knowledge, resources, and technology we need for sustainability and abundance for everyone, the sooner the transition can start. Please feel free to email, follow, share, comment, like, subscribe. I welcome any and all feedback or support, and I hope you'll tune in next time for another episode of the All Real Show.